Habits. You've likely heard that they're the secret sauce of success. John C. Maxwell, the country's leading authority on leadership, has said, "You will never change your life until you change something you do daily," aka a habit. We've all experienced the disappointment and frustration of setting some kind of New Year's resolution that fades out by January 5th. If only there were some kind of mathematical equation to help us with installing realistic habits that we can maintain long enough to see them radically transform our lives. The mathematician in me is geeked to share that there is, in fact, such an equation. Today we start our 3-part series on Habits 101 with Map It. Dr. B.J. Fogg, behavior scientist at Stanford University, wrote the New York Times bestseller, Tiny Habits, in which he discusses what's been coined as the Fogg behavior model. B equals M plus A plus P, which represents the fact that a behavior or a habit is the outcome of motivation, ability, and a process. For all us visual learners out there, let's display this formula on a graph. On the x-axis, we have our ability. On the y-axis, motivation. And the action line is a hyperbolic function. Brings back sweet, spooky memories of Gabriel's horn, doesn't it? I digress. A prompt is essentially any event that triggers the habit. So we want the prompt to be very obvious. Whether or not we follow through on the activity we're trying to turn into a habit depends on the combination of our ability and motivation. If that combination lands above the action line, then when the prompt eventually occurs, we're highly likely to perform the desired habit. If, however, the combination of our ability and motivation lands below the action line, then when the prompt occurs, we'll find an excuse and the habit will never be formed. To better understand this diagram, let's look at the two extremes. If our ability to do the activity is very low, in other words, the activity is currently hard for us to do, our motivation has to be extremely high for us to actually follow through when the prompt occurs. On the other extreme, if our ability to perform the activity is very high, meaning that it's really easy for us to do, then we only need minimal motivation to perform our intended activity when prompted. And that's the key to building tiny habits. As an example, let's look at one of Dr. Fogg's many tiny habits that eventually enabled him to personally lose 20 pounds. Here's the algorithm that Dr. Fogg installed to kickstart his weight loss. Go to the bathroom, flush the toilet, do 2 push-ups. So let's map this habit out. Dr. Fogg's ability to do 2 push-ups was high. It was easy for him to do, and his motivation to lose the weight was relatively high. And even if it wasn't, it didn't really have to be that high to get him above the action line. The prompt was very obvious every time he would use the restroom. The outcome? Magic. Now you're probably thinking, seriously, just 2 push-ups? Dr. Fogg explains that if after finishing his 2 push-ups he wanted to do more, he would do so. But the habit was just 2. Why? Because that ensured that it would become a habit that would last. So let's turn the spotlight back on you. What habit are you trying to develop these days? How can you make it tiny enough that you can consistently crush it and build the kind of momentum that will change your life? Now that we mapped our habits, be sure to check back in next week when we ABC them.